120. Oof.
A little crosswind.
Crosswinds, right?
Coming right, 055. Shaw 1-3, you're clear to detach.
1 roger. Shaw 1, red crown, increase speed to Mach 0.8. Shaw 1, 2 pop-up groups. West group bullseye, 016, 167,000.
Nice shot. Hey guys, Spud here, as always. As I'm sure many of you guys have noticed at this point, my Discord server, Spuds, has been running a campaign that, to my surprise, a ton of you guys have expressed a lot of interest in. I've been getting countless comments on videos, PMs, emails, things of that nature from you guys expressing interest in this particular storyline of a campaign that we've thrown together, very much to my surprise. So I figured it was time to dive in and make a video dedicated solely to this little campaign we're running. This campaign was really born out of my having mission maker's block, really just a severe form of writer's block that affects those of us who have punished ourselves by regularly making DCS World missions. I was having the hardest time coming up with good ideas to create fun and exciting missions for my Spuds Discord server. I was really racking my brain, and then it hit me. Most of the beauty and detail of the DCS Syria Map was hidden from me behind the harsh blinders of realism. I found myself having some sort of an idea about a mission to create, only to look at the Syria map and then have that historian and geopolitical geek voice in my head start screaming, "Absolutely not, Spud. Israeli jets can't fly there, and absolutely not, American jets can't fly there. And no, of course not, Greek jets and Turkish jets can't fly in a mission together, and especially not from Cyprus." And of course, on and on ad nauseum, until I was honestly just fed up with even attempting to create missions on the DCS Syria Map. So I decided to look back at all of my videos created for the Syria Map, and I realized that almost all of my missions were flown from just 3 of the dozens of airfields that populate the map. Of course, Ramat David, King Hussein Air College, and in Sirlik. I mean, how boring is that? At this point, I'm pretty sure I can taxi around Ramat David with my eyes closed. So I thought to myself, how can I break this block and free my imagination to create fun and inspiring and exciting missions for my DCS World community? So I kind of started to daydream about what makes a DCS World map awesome and fun to fly on, but also critically to make missions for. That's when I really started reaching out and asking my community about interest in a fictional map for DCS World. You guys may recall some of those community posts I put up onto my YouTube channel asking if you guys would even be interested in such a thing. If you guys would like me to create a video in itself about DCS World maps, picking locations for maps, and the merits of potentially creating a fictional map, please let me know in the comments section down below. So, knowing we couldn't have a fictional map in DCS World to free my mind and Mission Maker's block right now, because Spud wants it right now, I thought about the other flying games and sims that I've played over the years. I couldn't really find much inspiration with Ace Combat. There's just too many cringe anime references and whatnot. But I thought back to my favorite flying game of all time as a kid, the awesome Sim Light Strike Fighters series from Third Wire. I know many of you guys out there have played Strike Fighters and really loved it over the years, and I'm definitely fall into that category. The original Strike Fighters games shipped in their boxes with a fictional map. Grounded in reality, of course, there were no floating islands or massively large mountains of any kind. It was a coastal desert map, of course simply called Desert, and it was perfect because of its simplicity and functionality. The more I thought about my fond memories for Strike Fighters, the more I compared the old desert map to the Syria map, and I found some striking similarities. a coastal Middle Eastern locale with cities, mountains, and flat deserts. Of course, in the old desert map, the coastline runs east to west, and on Syria it runs more north to south. But other than that, the geography is pretty darn similar. The desert map and its two belligerents, the Kingdom of Dhimar and the Empire of Paran, are locked in an eternal struggle for the massive oil reserves that straddle the border that was unfairly drawn through the hot burning sands by France and the United Kingdom following the Great War. Dhimar and Paran represent the two sides of the Middle Eastern conflicts of the Cold War period. While their fictional nature releases them from the political and historical baggage of their real-world facsimiles and allow the player to concentrate solely on the fun of flying in a Cold War hotspot. Dhimar, of course, represents an amalgamation of the Western-backed Middle Eastern nations, a mashup of Imperial Iran, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. Opposing the Kingdom of Dhimar, the Empire of Paran is a combination of Ba'athist Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Libya, and Islamic Iran. Because we do not have the original desert map available to us in DCS World, we have to change the geography and the names of various locations of our two nations, but we want to make sure that we keep the spirit of the old desert map that we loved so much. In our DCS reimagining of the eternal conflict between Dhimar and Paran, the border of the two nations runs from the coastline just north of Beirut to the mountains north of Damascus, where it turns sharply to the northeast, and then north of Palmyra it turns once again to the southwest, where it runs deep in the deserts on its way to the Baghdad area. In April of 1919, shortly after the lines were drawn in the sand by the Entente powers as they carved the Near East into spheres of influence, the Shah of Dhimar sent an expedition to survey his new borders with the new Empire of Paran to the north. Geologists and experts from the Southern Oil Company, an American-funded oil enterprise, discovered oil bubbling to the surface in an area called the Valley of Palmyra. It is a desolate and empty region, known as the Badia, with little else than rocky Sarir, Bedouin encampments, camel trains very near to the border with the Empire of Paran. Within days, the American Southern Oil Company had already erected oil derricks to drill into the rocky sands.
Two flankers in front of us, heading to...
Shortly after the birth of the two nations, in August of 1919, the Sultan of Paran lodged a complaint to the not yet fully formed League of Nations, disputing the border drawn between the Empire of Paran and the Kingdom of Dhimar, and laying his claim over the Palmyra oil fields, citing both historical and traditional precedent. The Sultan then sent his cavalry across the Badia and into the Palmyra oil fields, and after fierce fighting with the Royal Dhimar Army and the American oil workers, who were ostensibly United States Marines dressed in other uniforms, the Battle of the Palmyra Valley concludes with the retreat of the Parani cavalry. This battle marks the beginning of the decades-long conflict between the two nations. By September of 1935, the Sultan of Paran has grown old and weary of the conflict. Numerous incursions into the Palmyra Valley and oil fields have been repulsed by the entrenched Royal Dhimar Army, as well as the unforgiving and remote desert, whose heat takes as many lives as the artillery and gunfire. The Palmyra oil field war slows and finally stops completely with the death of the old Sultan, resulting in an uneasy peace between the two nations. But his young and eager son, who takes the seat of power in Paran, cultivates a new ally, Adolf Hitler. By October of 1943, with the Allied invasion of Italy, the Nazis are no longer in a position to support the Parani army, and their panzer divisions start to rot in the hot desert sun, as spare parts and ammunition dry up, rapidly leading to another relative peace in the Palmyra Valley area. At post-war, in January of 1955, the Kingdom of Dhimar has become vastly wealthy and powerful, from sales of oil from the Palmyra oil fields to allies during the Second World War and the massive post-war economic boom. Following the revelation of the Holocaust and other atrocities committed by the Nazis, the Shah of Dhimar has created a program to welcome Jews into Palestine and integrate them into Dhimari society. The introduction of Jews into the Holy Land and the steadily growing economic disparity leads to growing resentment of Dhimar by the Parani people. By March of 1957, resentment over the economic disparity, as well as the integration of Jews into the Holy Lands, boils over into a bloody coup that takes place in the Parani capital of Incirlik. The old Sultan's dynasty finally came to an end, and the new Sultan, who came to power, wasted no time in inviting a Soviet delegation to his capital and to begin a massive military buildup with the best military hardware the Soviet Union permits him to buy. By May of that same year, 1957, the Shah of Dhimar watches with growing unease as intelligence reports flood his palace in Damascus, depicting dozens of brand new MiG-17 and MiG-19 fighters, along with Il-28 Beagle bombers, touching down on newly constructed air bases across the border areas, as hundreds of new T-54-55 tanks and BMP APCs roll to the border near the Palmyra oil fields. In response, the Shah hastily approaches the United States for assistance with crash buys of F-100 Super Sabres and Patton tanks to meet the new threat. By June of 1959, after 2 years of increasing tensions across the border regions of Dhimar and Paran, a car bomb rams the gates of the Royal Dhimar Army barracks in the border city of Beirut, killing 34 civilians and military personnel. War appears imminent and both sides send troops and armor to the border. By July of that same year, the Parani Navy blockades the city of Beirut, and the Sultan of Paran claims the city and the Palmyra airfields as sovereign territories stolen from Paran by the Triple Entente. The Prince of Dhimar knows that their military is still understaffed and takes inspiration from the American volunteer group in China during the Second World War, and establishes his own flying Tigers, equipped with F-100 Super Sabres, to dramatically increase Dhimar's air power and quickly fills its ranks with American, French, and Turkish Hun pilots. For his part, President Eisenhower, worried about the prospect of the Soviets gaining control of the strategic Palmyra oil fields, sends the USS Forrestal to take up station off the coast of Dhimar and dispatches Tactical Air Command F-100 squadrons, as well as the 1st Infantry Division to defend Palmyra. In September of 1959, Parani Army tanks and APCs were first seen crossing the mountain passes and smashing through the border guard posts deep in the Badia. War had officially returned to the desert. While the Parani army was expelled from the Palmyra oil fields in December of 1959, the rising tensions between East and West simply added fuel to the fire of the conflict, with border clashes and all-out invasions occurring roughly every 3 to 4 years in the 60s and 70s. The superpowers poured more advanced weaponry and systems into their respective proxies. The Royal Dhimar Air Force started to purchase and operate the most advanced Western aircraft available to purchase, including the F-4C, D, and E Phantom, all models of the F-15 Eagle and the F-14A Tomcat. The West's strategic interest in the Palmyra oil fields was so great that the American military actively fought to defend Dhimar throughout the 1960s and 70s, with Operations Quicksand, Rattlesnake, Desert Thunder, and Desert Fury, with the latter two being the most destructive for the Kingdom of Dhimar and the Empire of Paran. Following the American withdrawal from Vietnam, the Nixon and later Ford administration sought to pursue their strategy of Vietnamization in Dhimar, aptly naming it Dhimarization, which sought to reduce Dhimari reliance on American air power and ground forces and to make the Royal Dhimar military more self-reliant and capable of defending its own borders with its purchase of the latest aircraft and tanks from the West. Dhimarization would finally reach its culmination with the 1982 Battle of the Bekaa Valley, in which the Royal Dhimar Air Force destroyed the Parani army's incursion into the Bekaa Valley and devastated the Parani Air Force and Air Defense Forces. The Empire of Paran's defeat in the Bekaa Valley in 1982 showed the world the massive superiority of Western equipment and doctrine, and largely put an end to conventional warfare between the two nations, and led to the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. With the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Empire of Paran lost its main benefactor, and in 1995 suffered total economic collapse, with only the meager petrodollars of the oil on its side of the border sustaining what was left of the country and its military, as the government cracked down on the populace to maintain some resemblance of order. The international community reacted to this crackdown with even harsher sanctions, worsening the economic situation within the Empire of Paran and leading to the growing desperation of the Sultan. Because of the underlying resentment of Dhimar by the Parani people due to the massive inequality between the two nations, along with the integration of Christians and Jews into the Holy Land of Palestine, led to a sustained campaign of terror attacks, border skirmishes, and indiscriminate artillery and rocket launches into Dhimar by various paramilitary organizations inside the Empire of Paran that has lasted from the 1980s until this day. With nowhere else to turn, the Sultan of Paran looked to Putin's Russia in the late 2000s, looking to rekindle the special relationship between the Empire of Paran and Russia. Following the reinvigoration of the Paran-Russia relationship and the signing of new treaties of friendship, a massive rearmament program has been undertaken to revitalize the Parani military, with upgrading and refurbishing of legacy Soviet systems like the SA-5 and the integration of new aircraft like the MiG-29 Fulcrum into the Parani Air Force. To make up for lost economic prosperity from the decades of being denied access to the Palmyra oil fields, and the crushing sanctions levied by international bodies, the Sultan has ordered his armored divisions to the border and aimed his considerable arsenal of Scud ballistic missiles at Damascus, the political and cultural capital of the Kingdom of Dhimar. Later that same day, he addressed the nation and the world with a televised address that laid out the many grievances of the Empire of Paran and accused the Kingdom of Dhimar of slant drilling under the border to steal what little oil was ceded to Paran by the Triple Entente nearly 100 years ago now. Fearing the worst, the Shah of Dhimar has reached out to the American president and NATO for assistance in the event of an attack on his nation. In response, the US and NATO have agreed to augment the Dhimari Air Force with additional aircraft, stocks of ordnance, and including the deployment of a US aircraft carrier and several NATO land-based squadrons being sent to Dhimari air bases. So far, the mission is strictly defensive for US and NATO pilots, and the operation has been dubbed Operation Burning Sands. Many DCS World pilots in my community have played and loved the old Strike Fighters games and have jumped at the chance of bringing Dhimar and Paran to the DCS landscape. Beyond just participating in the missions and advising on mission making and planning, a few awesome members of my community have made some absolutely gorgeous skins depicting the Royal Dhimar Air Force on our favorite DCS World modules. A massive shout out to them and huge thanks, guys. I really believe that by bringing a fictional scenario grounded in reality to DCS World, we can make an awesome and very fun experience that isn't tied to the geopolitical realities of a place like the DCS Syria Map. And because I'm sure you're all wondering, we definitely plan on making the skins public once they're finalized and ready to go. If you'd like to participate in the campaign as a pilot, ATC or GCI controller, contribute via mission making, aircraft skin creation, or want to add to the story by writing lore about Dhimar and Paran, please join my Discord with the link below. Our next mission in the campaign is going to take place this Saturday morning, so come check it out, guys, and we would love to fly with all of you.
Bravo 5, 8 feet tower. Just a reminder, Shaw 13